Good morning, gentlemen, and welcome to the London Show. And Nigel talking. Right, CJE micros have been around a long time, as I told you. And we try to. I've been supporting the RISC OS market, well, the Acorn market, then the RISC OS market for all of that time. Now. We end up doing lots of different little things, so it's going to be talking about quite a few different odds and ends. Going back to sort of like the old days of RISC PCs, I'm sure a lot of you are still using RISC PCs, and are aware of problems with the battery. I wrote a blog thing which is on our website, which if you've not read it, I would suggest you reading. Because one of the things is that even if the battery doesn't damage the PCB, disconnecting the battery and leaving it normally means that the clock will not restart. The ARC chips are rather old, up to 19 years old, I'm told. And they don't seem to like not being used. So, but we. If you have a working system, then basically the thing to do is to store it properly, not in a loft, because we had someone donate some that had left a couple of years in his loft, and when we opened it up, the clock chip actually fell off the PCB. It had actually corroded away so much on the system, because yes, poor, low temperatures and that, the batteries start corroding much quicker. That. So the thing to do is make sure you have a working battery on it if you're going to store it. We've now got a whole load of options. If your system is working and you do need to change the battery, we sell the batteries. You can sell them into the motherboard, but they look just like the original. Or we do now have, if you want it on a little flying lead with a special AAA, we do now sell that as an option. Have asked us for a while for that, but we now do offer that as an option. But this one doesn't actually have, isn't ready to be sold into a PCB. It's got a plug on the end of it. Because what we've also done is for where people their clock has stopped working, and it's just the clock bar that has died. Unfortunately, you can't always tell until you fitted whether that is the The symptoms will normally tell you if you've got problems with clock and CMOS, but it's working apart from that, then you're probably okay. If it won't boot up, no matter what you do, power and delete, or your sound has stopped working, that's one of the things that can get down to like the corrosion, then it may be significant damage to the PCB. But if it is just the damage is relating to the clock, we have all sorts of problems where tracks either short or they don't make, so it's not normally very easy to start actually changing the surface mount chips or components to sort it. So what we have developed is a little PCB that can be either mounted on a podule connector, a mini podule connector, or, which I haven't got it with me, or we actually can supply it, connected, stuck on the back of a back plane, if you haven't got any podule slots. So we can keep you going with your older kit if you need to with those. The one thing is that you normally would have to disable the old clock, and that is a little surface mount chip, but let's get my orientation. But with the right sort of cutters, something like these ideally, which we could sell you if you need them, I think it's £5 or £6, I can't remember, not a massive amount for that, then you can get in at that. And in actual fact, at the Portsmouth show, I got a 10-year-old schoolboy and I showed him the instructions, and he came along and he cut the legs, and it's not a terribly difficult thing to do, because it's just two of the legs of an 8-pin chip that just need isolating. There's 2 clocks on the same I2C bus fighting over each other. It's not going to work nice and reliably. Right, then, might as well move along the table here. We've got umpteen different mini keyboards. We've got 2 on the stand that have the trackable built into the keyboard, a small one about that size, with mouse buttons, and then we've got an even smaller one which has a proper dedicated menu button. On the other one you have to map a button across to use it. In actual fact, one of the Raspberry Pis is in a Lego case down, I think on the left-hand side has that one built into it, into his little case. Peter Howkins, I think, which is some of the options. And this keyboard, this one has a built-in trackpad, and these, fortunately, they're USB, and they will just work on any RISC OS kit that is USB. Yes, there isn't a dedicated middle button for menu on it, so you need to map one of the others across. This particular mouse is more interesting. It's actually a gyro mouse. You can move by just waving it around. Well, that needs to be a bit more subtle, I'm sure, than that. Not the sort of thing I personally have a use for, but it will be of use for lots of people. One of the other things that we've just got in, when you've got things like, this is a Panda board or what we call it our baby Panda row. We've got it in a small metal case. One of the problems is the SD card is a bit exposed there, sticking out. So we have now got somewhere. Well, there's so much of the stuff nowadays is so small, we keep losing stuff. Well, we lose whole computers with Raspberry Pis and Panda boards being so small. But no, it's a short SD card. It's actually designed for certain Apple MacBooks that have options for SD cards, and where they want them to be flush with the surface, the end. They're designed for them. But it obviously fits just as well in here. It's not totally sort of short enough to, like if you put this into the Raspberry Pi cases, it will still stick out, but you can get at it, but it's relatively unobtrusive and not going to get damaged easily. The thing with the other, we actually have also in stock, the other micro SD to SD adapters that are actually, effectively PCB that fits in the SD slot and then mount a micro SD on the top. The problem with those is they then become quite a lot thicker, and you can't necessarily use them in all the cases. And, well, how do you get it out, right? If you know you're never going to need to get it out, yeah, fine. But these ones are quite useful. But they're, I think it's £6 for the adapter, which can be useful. Moving along the line, talking about SD cards, we've now got 64 gig SD cards that you can use for either your Panda or your Raspberry Pi, with the dual partitions, so it boots and is your local storage. Because on both systems, the fastest storage is the SD card by quite a way. If you try any speed tests on any Panda board system or Raspberry Pi based system, you will notice that it appears that a fat format drive can be a lot far quicker. In actual fact, this is basically not down to, not quicker than SDFS. SDFS is always going to be the quickest, but any USB connected storage, because that's, apart from the SDFS and your RAM disk, any other storage is going to be USB, whether it be a USB hard drive, a USB pen, or over the network to NAS or whatever. It all goes through USB on both boards initially to get off the off the board or to get to the network chip. But the thing is, the reason why FAT32 drives appear to be a lot quicker is that they have, FAT32FS has caching enabled in the filing system already, but for both in actual fact SDFS and SCSIFS, and that's all USB storage goes via SCSIFS, if it's on FAT32, that does not have caching. So saving large amounts of data, in actual fact you will know that the benchmarks seem to show there's not a lot in them, but small amounts of data, lots of little files, and that can appear to be a very significant difference. Fortunately, of course, on RISC OS, we don't really normally do much loading and saving of files. It's normally much more, you load it into memory and use it, basically. But those are, so we now have, basically, we can have any size SD card, we can do sort of those for it. The next thing, I've just realised I've left on my stand, but since my stand's the other side of that wall, I will be about 30 seconds. Right, this is, I'll have to actually look inside to remind myself if this is a pie in the box or a panda in the box. But this is a pie in the box. Basically, what we found is that you can get now these display panel that will, with a suitable adapter board, which is hot glued to the back of it there, I just make up, that then accepts HDMI. And it also will accept a 5-volt input to power panel. So we've now got a way of connecting up, and that this can be a Pi or a Panda to one of these panels. Now the problem is how to actually put it into some sort of packaging to look reasonable. Now, looked at all sorts of things, because naturally, yes, the display, if you come to stand, you'll see, comes very close to the edge of that, and trying to cut a square hole that looks really neat and professional, and to that it's not going to be very easily done. So we worked out, though, that if we actually cut up a hole to the size here, and then mount it like that, we then have the problem, though, of trying to how to sort of mask this off and make it look neat. We spent actually a lot of time and hassle and not vast amount of money, but certainly time. And I did come up with this, which sort of is an okay job, but it's very labour intensive to make and just wouldn't be commercially very useful. But what we have worked out is that this here is what they call laminated polycarbonate. It's a lot of things like, and certainly on the back of the A9, the label that has all the cutouts for the connectors and the text on it saying what the ports are is a laminated polycarbonate. So you can get it basically made in a matte black, self-adhesive to any shape you want. So we're looking at getting that done. The only problem is, well, getting the price down to anything reasonable, you're looking at a couple of hundred needing made, which is a bit interesting. But it's also, I don't know, it's not actually exactly the same thing, but something similar. On your standard BBC Micro, around the keyboard, the dark brown plastic that's stuck on to the cream case, if we could find a source of that, made and cut to shape, then we'd be very, we'd better do some nice things for these, we hope. So if anyone knows any sources of anything like that, please let us know. Because what we are doing though is basically offering to supply people with a panel and a case without any holes in it, but with a template, and basically, yes, we just did four drilled holes and then a coping saw. Although rather than doing it like that, you don't get a very straight line. I found that if you angle it right down, you can get pretty good cut on that, and then just basically quite a lot of hot glue. Now, one thing that hot glue wouldn't do though is you can get, and we've got, a touch panel that goes over the top. It is just a resistive touch panel, so it doesn't do multi-touch, and it then interfaces with a little PCB to USB. And of course, at the moment there isn't any RISC OS drivers for it. But if you're wanting something for maybe non-RISC OS, there are those. That is an option that will go over the top of that. Nothing's right. Okay. Right. So yes. So basically, we can supply the panels. The thing is, it's an HDMI panel, and it can come in either 800 by 480 or 1024 by 768. So it's really quite a reasonable resolution. And because there's adequate space in there to, if you need it to be networked, and you want to reduce the number of wires, you can get one of the nano routers and put the nano router in there, because the whole thing can be powered just by one 5-volt supply, so you could just have one cable going into a 5-volt. On the stand, we've got another little, we've got some of the smaller 3.5-inch power displays, which we modified to be 5 volts, and on one of them, well, we use a power over Ethernet, so we actually use an Ethernet cable to connect to it on that. Then we do have in stock the Raspberry Pi camera boards, the minute things. Unfortunately, there's no RISC OS driver yet, and but I'm hoping that at some time they will appear. But you'll see that's why people are using it for all sorts of projects. They're just a tiny little thing, and yet that actually will do 1080p at 60 hertz. So really good, high quality. And the main thing is, as I understand on the Raspberry Pi, is that the GPU, I'm told, does nearly all the work. So it shouldn't, well, I believe, even talking to someone about half an hour ago who helped design the GPU, was sort of saying, yes, it's not, it should be possible, it's not a massive amount of work, but yes, it probably relies on some inside information from Broadcom, but whether or not that actually is available publicly, don't know, unfortunately, answer on that, but we live in hope on that one. And then moving on to the other things. So basically, so we've got our two sort of system offerings are the the Raspberry Pi, the Raspberry Row and the Panda Row. So Raspberry RISC OS, Panda RISC OS. The Raspberry, obviously being a little bit cheaper, not as powerful as a Panda in raw grunt, although it does actually have better graphics output. You can get 1080, 1920 by 1200 out of a Pi, to any monitor that would accept that. On a Panda, that's the one thing that's not quite so good. You're limited to 1920 by 1080 unless you can find a display that does a low resolution input. Low refresh rate input. So we will supply you everything, anything from just one on its own to a kit, to an any case, a mini ITX case. However, people, if they were how polished they wanted. And we've just nearly got it sorted. All the software that for our the power control unit that we use in both the Pi and the Panda. And basically what it's going to offer is that if you just press the on-off button, just a momentary press of it, it pops up a thing saying, "Oh, do you want to close down?" If you do a shift control F12, it will offer you the option of turn the power off, a restart, or cancel. So it gives you sort of the options that people might want on there, and yet full power control. One of the other things that we're doing, we spent actually quite a lot of time and effort looking into doing cases like the Pi and the Panda, and then in the end just realised that there are a lot of other people out there doing that, and apart from designing our ATX brackets that allows us to put them into standard PC cases, we just buy in appropriate cases. But one of the other things we have been doing that also actually doesn't bring us any money is trying to help the effort to get RISC OS better on various hardware. So Willie Thies, who's actually done basically all the low-level stuff to do with getting RISC OS running on the Panda board, he didn't have some of the technical documentation. It wasn't available publicly. So we managed fairly quickly to get him the documentation for one of these support chips in there, but one of the other ones, it took about 9 months and about 30 emails and umpteen phone calls. And it wasn't actually to persuade them that we were a good cause and they should give us the data. It was just the fact that, oh no, who do you talk to? Oh, you talk to them. Oh, and they kept sending us PDFs of the 9-page outline of what the chip did. But we eventually, only last week, managed to get the proper latest documentation that we've now been able to pass over to Willie, so he will be able to sort out one or two of the idiosyncrasies, we hope, on the Panda system better. But at the same time, I did have the forethought to think, well, okay, if it's this hard, let's ask for a bit more. So basically, I've noticed that the Panda board uses an OMAP 4 chip, and the OMAP 5 chip is already available, and is the support chips for that, but they are only available under non-disclosure agreements, so I've signed the necessary things and managed to get the documentation for the later chips. So that is now readily available, because we're trying to make sure the work we do is available to everyone, whether, if you buy a Panda Row from us or you don't, it's available to us, because the market is now so small that it's not worth trying to sort of keep things to oneself, I feel. The other thing is, yes, as you, hopefully most of you will have had, if you've ever given us your email address, we will have sent you a newsletter a while back with some information, which we're not expecting to do large, frequent ones, but we're just hoping that we can get some information out there and one or two things, and talk about some new products, talk about some new things like this thing, problems with batteries we did, and I'm just doing another one to help you, reminding people about the advantages of keeping a backup of your Pling boot structure on your boot hard drive elsewhere. It can be very, very useful. The number of times the amount of time we spend on the phone trying to sort out people who and now whose boot is not completing and they've got problems, and trying to get everything working again can be very time consuming for them and us. And we don't mind doing it, but we do, well, unless for brief technical support, we can normally supply it. Yeah, we can sometimes, well, if it's very brief, we can supply it free of charge, but other than that, we do have to charge, because obviously we have to make the money somehow to pay the rent and the mortgage. But, so, yes, we're going to be doing, I'm going to be doing another blog, and we'll be doing a newsletter shortly, and we try and publicise it. And like that, we sent it out, in actual fact, just before the Portsmouth show, we sent it out to a lot of people, and one person turned up who'd never been to a RISC OS show in his life. Because actually I used to live in Singapore, but he travelled down from London just so he could go to the show, and he'd been a RISC OS user for years. But it was only because we actually emailed those people overseas details about the show, which was in the newsletter, that he got to hear about it. Another thing that we've just managed to get as of about nearly 5 o'clock yesterday evening. Not very late for couriers to deliver stuff, but I don't know about you, but at home, in our kitchen, I have a little double gang socket with a couple of chargers in it, and my phone and my wife's phone use a different charger. I have, in actual fact, two bicycle lights that charge up, and they have different chargers. And the camera, it has a charger, so you have rather a lot. And this basically helps cut down a little bit on it, in that basically it's a standard double gang 30 amp socket, but with 2 USB charging points on it. So make life a little bit easier.
It's got USB charge points on it.
So yes, so you could power your Raspberry Pi from it, or your unfortunately you couldn't power a Panda from it. That does use a bit too much power on that. Oh, the other thing is, so last unfortunately, yes, we are. Well, this information is on our website pretty well, but basically we do now have at shows, we have a Raspberry Pi specific price list. This one basically is about the Panda board, the Panda Row, and about the Baby Panda and the Pi and the Panda, the laptop version. And then this is our sort of generic price list, which hopefully people will find of interest and use. If you bear me a second, I'll just run down my little list and see if I've mentioned everything. So, has anyone got any questions?
Just a quick observation, Chris. The 30 amp twin socket with USB charging point, you used to be able to get, and I have at home, an external USB drive which has a 2-into-1 lead. So if the socket on your laptop to which you connect it or on your computer can't give enough current, then you can connect it to 2 USB outlets simultaneously. I just wonder if that kind of lead might be useful for
the USB standard says that ports should negotiate power, basically, but only up to half an amp. And the thing is, yes, especially the rotating hard drives are slightly over half an amp. I've seen some of them where they actually only have one cable. How good they are, I don't know, but that's why they split it. But to be quite honest, things is an awful lot of the USB hubs and that we have found, if you take them apart, 5-volt line wire to everything, earth wire to everything, they don't actually follow the standard, not a lot of them. Now this one actually is rated to 1 amp, and apparently it trips at 1.2, and then you just leave it for 10 minutes and resets on that. So yes, so that's the thing, is that it is, there is obviously a maximum you can do, so up to about 1 amp. So yes, that's more than adequate, like say to power a Pi or something. But yes, like if you had a Pi plus a display, it wouldn't be enough to do off that. But, the other thing was, yes, sorry, and this is basically, yes, this is what I've got here really, is basically a standard USB, micro USB to USB, so I could plug that into there and plug the other end into a Raspberry Pi, and this one has a power switch on it, because things like a Raspberry Pi doesn't have a power switch, but we basically, however you power your Pi, pretty much, we have a cable or an adapter that has a switch in it. I think we've got 8 different versions. You sometimes want a female on that end rather than a male, and lots of other DC input. Because yes, that's what we do on the stand, where we've got the display of little of 3.5 inch and 7 inch and 4.3 inch monitors. We actually power it off one standard 5-volt 2.5 amp power supply that has a standard DC 2.1 connector on it. We sell splitters for that, and then a cable that goes into the Pi, to try and reduce the number of wall warts that we have around the place. Thank you very much. And basically, yes, we hope to be here for a lot longer, but we do need people to be buying the kit. Otherwise, we won't be around if we don't make enough money to cover all the overheads and the bills. But so yeah, do come and talk to us about any of these bits, or Panda Rows, or Raspberry Pis. We'd be greatly, we should help, try and help you. And, so do. Thank you.